What's up, everybody? This is KARAK with ACG. Hit the notify all bell and subscribe for more videos about tech in the year 2023, as well as video game reviews and previews, all of items I buy myself. Let's start with the sorry state of VR in 2023, or in my words, where it's going to go. And you may think to yourself, well, I don't like VR. This isn't going to affect me. Well, think again, because some of that money that you're going to hope goes into a top-tier game is going to go into another long, year-long push for somebody to figure out how to get you into their VR system in their home, especially after Facebook priced themselves right out of the market after starting to see the light of day. They decided to ruin all of that goodwill pretty quickly. They created a headset for the incredibly popular Meta worker, who was apparently spending 10 hours a day inside of Meta, the kind of worker who only appears and is visible to the naked eye when Meta's founder asks someone how long they spend, which means it was pretty much a lie. Let's look at a couple systems here, and while this could be a great year for VR, I think a lot of us should probably expect it to not really change the ground much. First, let's look at the Panasonic headset, the Megain X. This looks like a top end of a headgear worn by mad scientists on a World of Warcraft trading card. Strange looking googly eyes aside, this is a much smaller headset than most others, and gives you an almost James Bond bad guy on a ski slope kind of art design. This is super light. It's 8.8 ounces. It has micro LED screens with 2560 by 2560 resolution, which is also a lot higher than some of the other devices we'll be seeing and talking about here today. It also has HDR full within the headset, which is very nice. ShiftAll is a division of Panasonic that is doing this work, working inside this VR headset to try to get it to be something that consumers are going to want to get. It's also releasing using the Snapdragon chipset, which nowadays is like a Ford of VR chipsets. It's the main provider despite its issues and its weaknesses and its age, but because it can be made and delivered in time and upgraded to another smaller step up, it seems to be that gargantuan monster in the room, the one specific chip that if anybody wants to create a headset, that's who they're going with. It's got pancake lenses and additionally adds things like leg trackers. Don't worry, you'll be able to easily spend more than $1,000 to play out your fantasy of a scientist gnome sex party dress up with this thing and its attachments. It's going to be one of those I am very excited to check out, especially because of its light headset as well as the overall look of it. I think this could be one of those ones that really just feels more comfortable. You're still going to look really weird using it, though. Next up, let's talk about the PSVR 2. Remembering that Sony hasn't let something die with as much expertise and cruelty than we've ever seen since the PSVR 1, I'm hoping the same doesn't happen here. Despite looking like it was created by the designers from the TV show Orville, there's a great deal to actually like here. Sadly, it also has some problems, including 110-degree FOV, which we really do want to set these up higher, especially when you're on an arcade system where racing is going to matter. 110 is actually pretty tight. This is not really an improvement over a lot of other headsets. Also, while it does have 120 hertz refresh rate, which is amazing, it's at the around 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye, so it is a step up, but it's not really as high as I would like to see it. On the other hand, it's got foveated rendering. Now, this takes the hardware requirements down a notch or two because it's actually got eye tracking mixed with that. Foveated rendering basically makes it so that it doesn't render outside of the really sharp areas that you can see, and the eye tracking will be looking at where you are actually looking in the game, effectively allowing for them to get a little bit more hardware punch out of it. However, it's insane cost, and being wired, you're still going to feel like you're walking through a Mandelbrot set of cables after a couple minutes of VR time, at least for now. It's also sticking with inside-out tracking with cameras, and as we know, every single company that comes out with this says we've perfected it, we fixed it. No one has. I assume we'll still have some of the same issues here, but there has been improvements for this kind of tracking, so I'm excited there. What's special, or not so special, about the PSVR is the cost. It is stunningly high. While there are 25 million PS5s sold out in the game world, buying a headset that is $150 to $100 more than the total brings that setup to play a single game on it to over $1,000. Lastly, they stated that no games are backwards compatible, and while they continue to look towards this, what we see is that Sony's basically plans overall is to never really embrace backwards compatibility on any of their devices. Luckily, third-party companies are taking up the slack and stating that some of their old games will be ready day and date Let's also talk about the games in a second. In a weird way, so far, games is the lowest denominator for Sony on the PSVR 2, other than Horizon's expansion, which looks to be a cut down and very on-the-rails experience in that world, and much of the other games are either titles already out or remakes of titles already out. I'm really excited to see what they can get people to do on the system. Unlike the normal console markets, it's VR where Sony has yet to show almost anything worth getting first party, but here's what's cool. To be comfortable, especially in this kind of situation, I would love to see them drop one or two of their premier titles as VR only. For example, I want 6 to 8 VR games that make me want to get the system, minimum at that, because of how expensive they are. If you could see Sony saying, hey, the next Killzone is on our VR system only, or the next Resistance, you could have a huge jump in the desire to get that system. Even a platformer like a Ratchet and Clank, something like that, if they want to put it on there. Sony has the balls to do it. It's just that sometimes the balls don't show up for those meetings. I don't know where they go. And we got the last one to die out. Hopefully this one won't. A lot of people love to say, well, next time, but many of us have lived through too many next times. Now, speaking of next time, in HTC Vive land, we're actually in their next time right now, and it's still difficult to tell where they are. Think about it this way. They have no shortage of headsets. Between businesses and consumer versions, they have pretty much everybody covered, even if it feels like no one is covered or no one's buying them. When they announced a new consumer headset recently with Pancake Optics, almost no one seemed to care. You saw a little bit of hotness on some of the forums, but there's a lot of confusion overall what they're doing because they have a tendency to vacillate between business and consumer. This might be also because HTC seems to like to work in this cloud of announcements and devices, almost like they want the PR, but the devices never really come. And when they do, they come in weird form factors. For example, the HTC Flow had some excellent features and again looked a bit like a Bond villain on a snow ski lift. But they hid them away like scared kids, and a lot of people couldn't get them because it really wasn't a consumer device. We don't know much about this new one. It's got, of course, 6 degrees of movement, a bit more powerful. We'll have to see how its tracking works. It's confirmed to have a 2-hour battery life, which I guess is good because head comfort is a thing, and most headsets around an hour and a half in, you're like, I'd like to take this off and recharge it. I don't know of any of these headsets really feeling like something you're going to want to wear for multiple hours on end. We'll just have to see. PlayStation's looks pretty cumbersome. The HTC Vive, I haven't seen enough yet to decide, but the Panasonic one with that front end, it could definitely feel heavy over time. Let's talk about the 3 big shadows in the room that are out there scaring the VR owners and the companies. The first is price. With many companies leaping to more commercial versions, it seems to show that VR creators know that the individual may not be the best space for VR. Even raising the Quest 2's price, while it makes no sense for the rest of us, it does sort of make sense for them. Instead of getting it out there and worried about consumers wanting a particular thing, it's more for the business, which is also where the Meta Headset 2 comes into it. You have the Pico 4 and some other middle ground devices, as well as the excellent, if somewhat troublesome, Reverb. I have all of those. They're all very good in that middle price. None of them are perfect, though. And that price is a solid concern. $250 to $350 is a sweet spot for, let's say, the Quest and the Reverb. It's just about right, but neither have had the changes that I think a lot of us want to see, like better FOV. While the premium prices like PlayStation's 5 VR and some of the others that we have been seeing, they sort of price themselves right out of the normal consumer range into a commercial range for companies, which to many gamers becomes even more confusing when they see headsets that look like they almost have the same specs selling for $200 or $300 cheaper in different areas. And with so many different headsets, it can be very confusing. It reminds us of HD TV, and in particular HDR and TVs, where the minutia matters so much more than you can expect, where the cost could be completely different and yet the numbers look like they matter, and gamers and consumers end up having to parse large bits of data about whatever product they're buying to find that one caveat to be so much more than the other, or in some way is causing this other TV to be so much cheaper. The second is, as always, content. My crystal ball says PSVR 2 has a good chance to sell to consumers who always buy into Sony's ecosystem. But as someone who is on that list, what I have seen there, ports, other companies taking on the brunt, and as of yet, nothing close to being worth of the buy-in for that price. I do feel like there's a very good chance that it'll be one of those things that Sony wants to see what happens before they support it. And unfortunately, that means a good year, if not 18 months to 2 years, for titles to really get in there lickety-split. Luckily, we got Horizon. We also have No Man's Sky, but at some point, No Man's Sky is now the Skyrim of all systems, and certainly the Skyrim of VR systems. And you also got Skyrim, which is a Skyrim of VR systems. Additionally, we haven't heard that Skyrim is backwards compatible on the PSVR 2. And the idea that that is not going to be available on the PSVR 2 day one is really shocking, since we know Bethesda definitely loves that. Is that some part of the Bethesda-Microsoft combination? I don't know. It's up to Sony to figure that out. And the last issue that's highly important is wired versus wireless. Let me explain exactly why. Regardless of how thin the wire is or what setup you have, the idea of a wireless system is almost always better than a wired one. A wired one can be tripped. It can pull the sockets out of the ceiling if you have some kind of grapple system to hold up the wire, or it can feel uncomfortable on your head, or it requires that next step. All of these VR companies want to make it so that there is no next step. That's really the holy nirvana of VR. The idea of a system that you can grab and just put on and walk away. And we certainly see that with Panasonic's headset. That's what they're looking for, is something that is akin to putting on glasses. And by the way, that's still difficult. Talk to anybody who many times needs glasses to see something, and instead of grabbing the glasses right in front of them, they're just going to squint at whatever it is before putting them on. VR has that innate issue, and the wire is a problem. However, going wireless is also a problem. You have compression. Even if you have the faster 6E routers or 5 routers, and you've got your own channel set up, there's some compression that can show up there. You have different software solutions that people have been trying to work out for years, but it's not really at least perfect at this particular time. The only one that should be would be a wired one. There's a lot of bandwidth going into that VR headset to get 2 screens at such a high resolution at 120 or 90 hertz rate. That is just absolutely a ton of content that you're delivering, which is why compression becomes a thing. So we're looking at all this, and we're trying to figure out what we can do. In fact, a wire and comfort can stop you from feeling sick or getting ill during a game, because you're not looking down trying to figure out where the wire is, even though you can't look down, because if you look down, you're just seeing the character's feet. You're not actually seeing your own feet and seeing where the wire is, or that slight pull of the wire on the back of your headset, which can then affect your entire vestibular system and make you feel a little bit ill. And that's another thing. Just motion sickness in and of itself can be a thing for a lot of people. We've got boundary systems, Guardian systems, all that kind of stuff to fix it. But there's a lot of problems in VR. You see a lot of companies out there putting their best foot forward, but right now, especially with the sourcing issue with chips for a lot of these, and trying to get a lot of power in a small device at a certain battery length and time and speed that you can play, it's a very difficult road to hoe. I'm going to be really interested to see how PSVR 2 does, because if they can launch some backwards compatible stuff and they can get some third parties in there, you could have a great system there, or we could have the exact repeat of what we've had so many times in the console space with all kinds of peripherals. So anyway, that's how I see 2023. A list of caveats, some good headsets coming our way. It's just going to be very interesting to see if they make sense and if they end up landing right. If you like these videos, give them a thumbs up. Make sure to hit the notify all button, subscribe. Check out the Patreon. It truly helps as YouTube continues to destroy channels left and right. The Patreon is really what ends up keeping the channel going. I love you guys for that. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.